I think the ability to move on, win or lose, is a separating factor among the best players in the league. I don't know what you think, Trey, but that always sticks out to me.
Yeah, the biggest thing is I think it would be like a rational confidence and a little bit of delusion. And you see it in Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Haliburton. Jalen Brunson is 6'2" on a really good day. Not the most athletic, but clutch, like the winner of the clutch player of the year in the NBA. Tyrese Haliburton obviously is a little bit taller, bigger guard, but he's also skinny and not that and thin, just to be honest. And he has no fear whatsoever. Both of those guys have no fear whatsoever. And you look at them and you're just like, are they really supposed to be this good?
Back to the Young Man at 3, as always, presented by our friends at Wondery Media and 342 Productions. Trey Murphy with me as always. Trey, we've got a legend in the building tonight. Do you want to do the honors of introducing?
Absolutely. Legend in itself. A man, no myth, great voice on the TV. They said a lot of great things about me on my game, so I'm definitely going to be appreciative of that. Duke legend, Jay Bilas. Please clap it up, everybody. Please clap it up.
You guys are really misusing the word legend. That just means old, I think.
Duke legend.
I'm not going to make any old jokes. I made enough.
Duke legend, ESPN legend. Now, as we were mentioning before, Jay's also doing NBA games in addition for ESPN and has been absolutely crushing it, acting like he's been doing this for 20 years. Jay, we were just talking about this off camera, but your process, your first year, you did your first NBA game in October. What's the year been like in terms of this for you?
It's been great. I mean, I've been a consumer of the NBA my whole life. You know, watching it, I've always kept up with it, but was identified with college. And I've done NBA games in the past, but it was always those announcer swap deals where, you know, like Van Gundy would do a college game and I'd do a pro game, stuff like that, maybe one a year. But this was more of a full schedule. I mean, there was a couple months where it was difficult, like in January, February, where it was difficult to squeeze NBA games in because I was doing so many college games. But it was a blast. I mean, it's I see more made shots in an NBA game than I do in 2 college games. But it was awesome. The coaches were great, players were great, and I mean, you're not going to find a better product than the NBA. It's fabulous to watch.
Speaking of great product, we've got 2 great conference final series, one starting Tuesday night, one starting Wednesday. Fellas, both, I wanted to get your thoughts yesterday in particular in Game 7. Jay, we'll start with you. What did you think about how Caruso defended Joker?
Well, I was a little surprised that they did that because it had been, for the first 6 games, it had been mostly Holmgren and Hartenstein. And they really, after game 1, used Hartenstein to keep a body on him, and they kept bodies around him. But they wanted Hartenstein on Jokic and then to have Holmgren and his length kind of behind him as a backstop, kind of a free safety shot blocker around the rim. But, you know, you guys know Oklahoma City's so good defensively. Like, their ball pressure is excellent. I think of rotations and closeouts in the NBA, they're the best at it. They really do play 5 as 1 on the court. And then they're deep with athletes. You know, you bring Cason Wallace in, who can really guard the ball, and he gets a lot of steals. And Caruso is one of the best defenders in the league. And like, Caruso makes a stand every time, and he's not going to back up. I mean, that closeout he had on Christian Brown in the first half over in the corner, and he locked him in the corner, and Brown wound up getting called for a walk. I'm like, going, that doesn't happen very often. And, you know, with all the turnovers they force, I mean, they're the best defensive team in the league because they have everything from the rim out. So even when they don't play particularly well offensively, or if Jalen Williams doesn't have his best game or all that, I know they got Shea, but you know, they're in every game because of their defense. It's remarkable. People say the NBA doesn't play any defense. They clearly don't watch the NBA, because they do.
Trey, did you see anything different yesterday?
I think Jay pointed out the whole Caruso matchup, which was, an important adjustment that I think they probably wanted to save until they really needed it. And it worked really well. I want to say that third quarter when it was like 4 straight possessions where Denver had a turnover and it was either a steal or a deflection or out of bounds. And OKC went down and scored. They got so many layups. Like it was literally layup lines out there. And you just saw just how controlling of a defense OKC has because you can't attack one single person in the entire lineup. And I think that's what the NBA as well as the playoff basketball has, boiled down to is finding a matchup that you like and attacking that matchup. And what do you even really pick on OKC's team? Like, who do you pick is like, all right, we're going to try to attack this matchup. There aren't really any good options. So, Denver just looked like they just couldn't play basketball correctly because OKC was just really just physical and suffocating them defensively.
I would have liked to have seen that game though with Denver healthy because Aaron Gordon had the hamstring and then he was fighting the calf throughout the year, those kind of soft tissue injuries, and then Michael Porter Jr. played great in game 3. I can't remember how many points he was. They had 4 guys score over 20 in game 3. They were great. But he couldn't lift both arms over his head with that left shoulder injury, and he didn't look like himself throughout the series except one game. And if they were healthy, I mean, it's one thing to go after Jokic and throw a lot of bodies at him, but he's such a good passer. If he's got people to pass it to that are healthy, I would have liked to have seen the result. I'm not saying that they would have won, but it wouldn't have been a blowout like that if they were healthy.
Jay, to that point, and Trey and I have talked about this a little bit. When you look at, looking at the Minnesota series a little bit, when you look at both of these rosters and how they've won so far in these playoffs, they obviously both have superstar, MVP caliber guys on the team, but it's also they both are so deep. And you, on like a macro level, when you're looking at team building in the league now, you got to do a lot of things right to have a lot of good players, so it's easier said than done. I don't want to dismiss that, but it does feel like a major advantage for both of these teams is like not all your guys need to be on because you're going 9 or 10 deep. So you'll have a Nas, you'll have a Caruso, you'll have a Kaysen go off the bench and maybe make up for the fact that, one of your sort of quote unquote stars is having an off night, and so is that a trend that you've just seen more of in terms of success so far this year?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the money. There are a lot of teams that are paying, or some teams that are paying a ton of money to some of their starters, and they can't afford to have a deeper bench. I think Oklahoma City's really well constructed, and they've got so many assets they haven't even used yet. Like the amount of draft picks they have stockpiled is really impressive. So they're not going anywhere, in my view. Like Minnesota's been an interesting team because they executed the trade that brought in Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, and I think early on in the season they were trying to get used to that and using kind of a high volume scorer, an on demand scorer, in Julius Randle, who kind of operates out of the low block sometimes and out of the elbows and all that. They're used to him now, and he's used to playing with Rudy Gobert. And I think after the All-Star game, I would say Minnesota, outside of Oklahoma City, they've been one of the 2 or 3 best defensive teams in the league since the All-Star game. And like to your point about having like Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dante DiVincenzo coming off the bench, it's not that guys can have off nights, in my view, as much as they don't need to pace themselves because they know they're not going to have to play 40 plus minutes. That might happen in a game or 2, but they don't have to do it. You can keep them under 40 and you're still getting really good production. Like Naz Reid's as good as almost most 4th or 5th men in the league. And he could have won 6th man of the year again this year. You saw what he did to the Lakers. And DiVincenzo hadn't shot the ball his best in the playoffs, but I don't doubt that he's gonna be really good against OKC. That's to me, that's the future. Like that, I think a lot of people expected either the Lakers or the Warriors to be at this spot, but I think we're seeing kind of the future of the NBA with Oklahoma City and Minnesota and two of the biggest stars in the game and Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Do you think Denver's effectiveness with the zone and OKC just not hitting shots for 2.5 games? They got hot yesterday in the second quarter, but they really had a problem with the zone. Do you feel like there's something that Minnesota can learn from that?
I don't know for sure if Minnesota will take that same approach because they have different personnel where their one-on-one defenders are just so much better than Denver's one-on-one defenders. I feel like a lot of times with the zones, you try to hide guys a lot in order to, just keep them out of matchups, keep them out of foul trouble. So I don't think Minnesota will resort to that. Now, if they're getting just abused defensively and they're not able to guard and stay in front of guys, then I think they might, try to go back to that. But also, too, if you look back at, it was one of the games that they played, I want to say in March, late March or early April, 1 or 2. And it was a game where Minnesota was down like 25 or 25 plus points. And really, they didn't try to mix things up defensively. They just cranked up the pressure. And then they got stops, they got steals, started scoring. And I think a lot of it is going to be, Minnesota trusting what has worked for them the entire year and not trying to stray away or do other things that other teams do. The best thing to do is not adjust to other teams, but make teams adjust to what you have. And so I think Minnesota will probably have to do that in defensive sense.
Yeah, and if they do play any zone, it won't be for extended periods. They may give it a different look to try to. The one thing that is pretty consistent on every level of basketball is players tend to stand around against the zone. There's not as much movement, but I know Oklahoma City, I think it was in game 4 when they were playing against Denver zone. They did a really good job. They'd use Caruso to set a ball screen on one of the top guys. And that got him into some actions that were really helpful to kind of move the defense a little bit and get some matchups that were effective. The one thing about zone, like when you play man, you decide who guards your best player. When you play zone, the other coach decides who guards your best player because you can move your players around to find a matchup within the zone. But it takes some smarts and some preparation. But I don't think you're going to see a steady diet of it.
Jay?
Actually, hold on. Let me recant my statement because now that I'm starting to remember that game, I think what ended up happening is Minnesota went to a zone and Caruso was the guy in the middle trying to make plays. And I think Caruso struggled a little bit that game, and then they were trying to force Lou Dort into shots. And then that's when Minnesota was able to make their run because OKC went cold shooting that night. I do remember this now because when you said Caruso was in the middle of that Denver zone, I said, yeah, that's exactly what happened in the Minnesota game. So I think OKC might have learned from that game and, taking that as, homework to do in practice so they could be prepared for a zone in the playoffs.
Jay, when you look back at Ant and Shai, just from you watching them in school and just the growth, what's your thought process and where they are now based off where you sort of were first, kind of exposed to them?
It's weird. The draft analysis job is harder than I thought it was going to be when I started doing it in 2003. Like my first year doing the draft for ESPN, it was the first year ESPN got it. It was the LeBron, Bosh, Dwayne Wade draft, and that was pretty good draft. So you had a bunch of players that you knew, man, these guys are going to be stars in the NBA. And in the 22 years or so that I've been doing it, you've looked at a lot of players, and some players surprise you in that they don't play as well in the NBA as you thought they would. And others surprise you and you're going, man, I had no idea he was this good or would be this good. And that's probably true of guys who played against these guys. It's not unique to any one person, but they're like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I thought was really good at Kentucky. And I thought he'd be a good pro. Did I think he'd be MVP of the league? I did not. I did not see that. Anthony Edwards, I did. Like I thought, man, there was a debate among some of our draft people about who would go number 1 in Edwards' year, whether it was, him or LaMelo Ball or maybe even James Wiseman. I'm like, no, it's Anthony Edwards. Like for me, it was a no-brainer. Now, you're wrong sometimes, but I was like, they don't make him like him very often with how he shoots it. Dynamic, athletic. He had it all. I just didn't know at the time, does he love this? Because he had kind of a little kid aspect to him. Like he's a man on the court and kind of a little kid off of it. I don't mean that in a negative way, but you just kind of, sometimes you're not sure. But the other guy was Jalen Brunson. Like I thought Jalen Brunson would play in the NBA and be a starter and all that stuff. I didn't think he'd do this. No way. And I don't even think Jay Wright, his coach, thought he would be doing this, where he's the clutch player of the year and first team All NBA. It's kind of amazing now. Like 10 years ago, small guards were not in demand, and now they're doing really well. Not all of them, but it's pretty remarkable what these guys have done in the league. I've been just kind of blown away by both Brunson and SGA.
Do you think that the success that Jalen's has had is not that it's transitive, but it's going to make GMs, team presidents, whatever, think differently about guys who've had this insane amount of success in school, who maybe, Trey and I talked about like Clayton this year, for example, like just people who maybe for whatever reason are, getting knocked for testing or their height or whatever it is, but they're just winners. If Jalen is a thing that people are going to look at now as just sort of like a test case, and maybe they won't drop to the second round.
Yeah, probably. I mean, but you say that, and then you're going, okay, well, just because Steph Curry turned into what he turned into doesn't mean that you go out looking for, tiny shooters now. Because when he came out of Davidson, I mean, his uniform could barely stay on his shoulders. He was so small. And look, I thought Steph Curry would be an outstanding NBA player, but that's another one where you weren't sure he was going to, be a transcendent best shooter to ever live kind of business. So you get surprised in those ways, but you don't want to. I think you want to stay, like, first of all, his character. Like, to me, you have to have talent, but if you've got athletic character and character off the floor too, that would be number one. Like when I look at Oklahoma City's roster, like they have priorities with how they pick up players, whether it's through the draft or otherwise, and signing them, and they don't waver from that. And those guys, I think that goes a long way to making a winning team. Like not every player has to be SGA. You have to have players that are going to fulfill roles and are capable of breaking out of those roles at times. But I still think the draft process, I have a lot of respect for the GMs and presidents and the folks that are making those decisions, because you make a decision, you have to live with it. Like I just spew out stuff on every draft pick, and sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. All I have to do is live with the tape of it. These guys have to live with the consequences of making a pick, and it's I think it's really, really difficult.
What was the read on Trey? Do you remember?
That's so crazy. I was about to ask that. I was about to ask in a more discreet way, but I was.
I thought you were a great 3-and-D prospect that you could shoot it and really guard, high character. You were going to come in and be a great teammate and elevate whatever team you were on. And one thing about guys that played at Virginia, you looked at their numbers and the numbers were deflated because it's always a low possession game. You're not a high scoring, high possession team. So I always think about a guy that played at Virginia named Marial Shayak, who was a really good player at Virginia, but he might have averaged 9 points a game. And he's a really good player, but he left and went to Iowa State. And the next year, played in Iowa State, he led the Big 12 in scoring, averaged over 20 a game. And a lot of it was just the way Virginia plays. But Trey, whether it was like DeAndre Hunter, some of the great defenders they've had there, like he checked every box of what you wanted in a player. Guarded great, went after the ball all the time, great teammate, can shoot it, and there was a lot of room for growth too. So I'd like to say I'm not surprised by any of Trey's success, because I'm not. But I think I don't know how you felt about it, Trey, but every expectation that I think people had of you, which were high expectations, you've exceeded and done it in a totally professional fashion. I mean, it's been really fun to watch.
I appreciate that a lot, for real. Thank you.
It's true. I mean, if I thought you sucked, I'd say so, but I don't.
It is funny. We do, not naming any names, but Trey and I have been together, I would say at least 3 or 4 times where coaches and GMs have come up to him. And this is just when I've been with him. So I can't imagine how often it's happened when I'm not been there and just been like, we fucked up. And they just say it. And there's nothing you can do about it now. But there's just the sense of like, I feel like people probably agreed with you, Jay, at the time, and for whatever reason it didn't work out. And then they just kind of got to watch and watching. But I guess this is what happens every year.
But it goes to your question. Like, do you take a player like Trey where it's going to be really good? Or do you take somebody that you're going, man, the potential of this guy, boy, if he lives up to what his measurables are and all this athleticism and all this stuff. There's an NBA scout, a friend of mine, longtime scout, who told me one time he has a sign over his door that said, "Don't be seduced by athleticism." Like you wind up looking at these high school players and all that are giving you these thoughts of, man, what could be instead of what is. And one of the great things about being my age is, when I was younger and coming out of college and afterwards, guys stayed 4 years. And when they went into the NBA, when Tim Duncan went in the NBA in like 1996, he was a rookie that had a lot to learn. Now, if he stayed 4 years now, they'd go, well, we know what he is. Now, maybe he's a bad example because he's, one of the truly great players to ever play. But there's this thought that, well, we know what his ceiling is, and you really don't, because we thought we knew what Jalen Brunson's ceiling is, and we didn't. And nobody knows. You have beliefs, but I think the best thing that these GMs can do, and they know it better than I do. I'm sitting there sounding like I'm giving advice, and I'm not. But is do all the homework to get to know who the player is. Because that's going to tell you more than just numbers on a page or watching them on tape. Find out who they are, because that's going to tell you more about what they're going to be than just their what you see, and because there's more to it than just what you see.
Thanks to our sponsor, DraftKings. The NBA Finals are almost here, and every second counts. With DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, you're not just watching history, you're betting on it. Now's your shot to get in on the action. Player props, game lines, live bets. This is playoff betting at its finest. Richie, I was in the DraftKings app earlier today. We were looking at the finals winner futures, team futures on DraftKings. Oklahoma City Thunder, minus 145. New York Knicks, plus 450. Minnesota Timberwolves, plus 550. Indiana Pacers, plus 600. Pacers still getting the disrespect. New to DraftKings? Bet just $5, and if your bet hits, you'll cash in with $300 in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code YOUNGMAN. That's code YOUNGMAN for new customers to get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive reward. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Do you have a guy since 03 that you feel like you were the most kind of like bullish on, but people didn't agree with you? Like you were sort of on an island with?
Not an island, but I thought Donovan Mitchell was a steal the year he came out of Louisville. There are certain players you really like, and then there are times when the dumbest thing that a guy like me can do is think that you're gonna find the steal in every draft. So you get that you say, okay, Donovan Mitchell, this guy's a steal or whatever, and he turns out he should have been taken in the top 3 or 4. And then, your bosses think, well, do it again. Well, then you start grasping at straws and maybe start making a mistake in that regard, trying to find something that you may not think is there. Some drafts are better than others. And then there are other times, you think some guy's going to be great and he doesn't turn out to be as good as you thought. That happens too. So there are going to be hits and misses all the time. I don't know anybody ever has bats 1,000 in that. But, you just kind of do the best you can. The beauty of it is, like, I have changed my tone a lot. Like, when I first started, I had these opinions that they were mine, and I wasn't, like, going with the herd or anything. But I'm a little softer on some of these things now because, one, I know I can be wrong. And then the other part of it is, well, you don't want to sit there and say everybody's great. You also don't want to dump on somebody's draft night. There's plenty of time for that afterwards. If you have some key points about somebody, like, hey, he needs to work on this, or this is still a question mark, that's fair game because this is a big boy school. But I'm a little bit more circumspect with my opinions on draft night itself because there's no reason to beat some drum on a negative when it's a player's draft night.
Trey, is there anything in retrospect about the process you would have changed?
Not a single thing. No, not a single thing. My pre-draft summer is when I feel like I really became like a man, on and off the court. That's when I really started taking this whole process seriously because it was really like, this is my livelihood that I have to fight for. And also too, when I entered into the draft, I still had my college eligibility. So I was kind of like halfway in, halfway out. Now, by the third day of pre-draft, I knew I was not going back to school. But, I had to convince my parents that I'm prepared for this. And so I had to make the necessary sacrifices. I wasn't out. Like, we had pre-draft in Miami. I didn't go out. I probably went out one time the entire summer. I didn't miss any workouts. I was, just very dedicated to, raising my draft stock because when I first came out in the draft, they had me as mid to late second round pick or undrafted. And when I saw that, it made me angry. Like, it really did, because I knew like that just wasn't accurate for me. And I knew I wasn't going to be satisfied with that. So I had to work my ass off in order to, raise that draft stock.
Do you think, Trey, that if you had today's landscape when you were coming out, would it have affected your decision if you were making legit money in college? Would you have been more open to say, I can take another year? I may not be ready for whatever the analysis would be, convincing your parents. Do you think it would have made it more likely you stayed another year?
I think it would have had like some thought to like sway me to going back to school. But for me, like, one thing that my dad always told me and always was like harping on me is that the longer you're in college, the more they can pick apart your game. And there are a lot of guys, like, I was a UNC fan growing up, and there are so many guys that shined their first year and probably should have left and then came back. And then you saw like, oh, he can't do this. Oh, he can't do that. And then you see the draft stock just lowering and lowering as time went on. And I knew for me, like, the ultimate goal was being in the NBA. And so I was confident enough in myself to be like, you know what? I can get $5 million in college, or I can go to the league now and then be closer to my second contract. So I've always had, an extreme amount of confidence in myself. So I was like, the money in college isn't comparable to NBA money.
Are you seeing a difference, Jay, from just being around all of this currently?
Yeah. I think what you're seeing, or at least what I'm seeing, is there's still the same amount of one and done players that there have always been since that became a thing. But you're seeing more sophomores and juniors decide to stay because the money's good and they're not sure yet. And I may be wrong in this, but this is the way I've always looked at it. When you're the real deal, you can do whatever you want. So if you're the real thing, you can come, you can go, you'll be fine. But you can also stay and you'll be fine. The ones, like, if you're worried about your draft status, and hey, I got to get up to here in order to go, Some guys need to go before they get found out. Now that's not you, Trey, but some guys do. They're overvalued and they know it, and they need to get in there and get paid before people find out that they're not the real thing. But a guy like Tim Duncan or Grant Hill or whatever, they stay as long as they want. It's not going to affect them. But it's what you pointed out, Trey, is really true, that the earlier you can start your clock on your second contract is really meaningful, as long as you're good enough to get there. And there are some players that get in there early and they find out that they're not good enough to get there. And because they sometimes you forget, young people forget that there's another crop of guys just like you behind you, and it's not all about just getting to your second contract. You got to get in there and perform right away. You still have time to develop, but it's not a developmental league anymore like it used to be. It's a perform now league.
What are you noticing? This is sort of a broad question, Jay, but are you in terms of we've had a ton of Euro guys on the show, over the last couple of years. In terms of that, the change in their sort of readiness and preparedness for the league itself, even when you're doing your sort of pre-draft analysis, does it feel like a combination of the EuroLeague stuff is just stronger and better right now? Are there specific trends that you're sort of noticing that are sort of leading to this, crop of guys coming over and having success right away?
Well, I mean, the 1992 Dream Team changed everything in basketball globally, because now, the United States still has the best players in the world. We just don't have all the best players. And so you're seeing great players come from all over the place, and they're very prepared because they essentially play pro basketball from the time they're young teenagers, and they're conditioned to be pros. So they can be ahead skills wise and in their development ahead of their American counterparts, but there are just so many more super talented, athletic American players. But we're competing against the rest of the world now, and it's legit competition. And you can tell that from the Olympics. We've got more of the best players than anybody. We only put 5 of them in a uniform at one time. And so other countries can compete. But what's interesting is I'm seeing more international players come into college than used to come into college. They used to go straight to the pros, but now they're using the college developmental system more often. I mean, geez, Illinois next year is going to be like a European pro team with all the internationals they have. So we're seeing more of that, but it's just sort of a choice people are making now of what's the best for your development. There's still I have no problem with a player that leaves college, even though he may know that, hey, I'm probably going to be in the G League for a while, because the G League is a great place to develop. All you have to do is all you worry about is basketball. There's no distractions, and you're being coached by NBA personnel, being watched by NBA personnel. So there's some great value to that if you're willing to go through that. But there's also great value in college, and you have to balance the basketball side of it with the personal kind of developmental side of you as a person. Some guys they may be talented enough to get in there as an 18, 19-year-old, but they may not be emotionally prepared for it, because it's a big deal. It's a big jump on that side too. I think Trey mentioned it. You're a man, and there are no excuses. You got to go in and perform, and they'll take care of you, but nobody cares that you're 19. It's a perform now thing, and you better be on board with it and be ready for it, or you'll get run over.
Trey, in the Indy Knicks series, you're coming up here this week, probably go to some of these games. What are you looking for first and foremost?
First off, just the energy in the Garden. I feel like I have to mention that this is the first time they've been to the conference finals in 25 years. I am very excited. Hopefully I'll be at game 1 and be able to experience the atmosphere out there. I've been to 2 playoff games in the Garden, and they've all been insanity, and they've all been first round games. So just to see what this is going to be like, I'm really excited for that. But just more on the basketball side. I'm more excited for the chance to just, all these teams in the conference finals now are teams that have not won a championship in, I think, who was the last one that won it? Was it,
The
I think they
Knicks.
said like Minnesota in like 19, the
Knicks in
Knicks.
72,
Knicks.
72, 72. The other
Yeah,
three haven't
72.
won.
Correct. Yes, the Knicks in 72. So it's like you're going to get a first-time champion, and I think this is the start of a new generation that is, starting to come up into the NBA and take their shots at the top of the ladder. I'm really excited to see that. Tyrese has been hooping. He's been leading that team since January 1 of this calendar year, and then the Knicks. I cannot lie; they've been playing above expectation. I'm not going to say that I expect them to do this. I don't think a lot of people did, but it's beautiful to see. Jalen Brunson has been so poised and just hooping. And it's crazy because he's turned his ankle almost every single game, and he's still out there performing, averaging damn near 30 points a game. So big shout outs to him.
What do you think, Jay?
I feel the same way. Like, I think the Garden for a Knicks game when they're good is the best atmosphere in the league, and it's one of the best atmospheres for basketball I've ever been in. I've been in the Garden for a lot of college games and great college games, but it doesn't compare to when the Knicks are really good. The Knicks have the two best players in the series in Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. And then their quote unquote role players with Bridges, Anunoby, and Hart. They're very, very good. And they may not be as deep as Indiana, because Indiana has a few more players that they can throw out there. But both of them are really good offensively. I think Indiana shoots it a little bit better overall. They're not a high volume 3-point shooting team, but they're a pretty high making team, and they've shot it really well in the playoffs. So that looks like a 7-game series to me. And I know people are going to harken back to the 90s and all that with the Knicks and the Pacers, but this will be a totally different series than those were back in the day. So I'm really kind of geeked up to see it. But I think. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it would be really interesting if it were Knicks, Minnesota after the trade that they executed, and both of them wind up in the finals against each other. There's part of me that would like to see that, but I hope we get 7 games from each of the series leading up to that, because I just want to watch these teams play. It's too much fun to have it over before that.
One thing I wanted to ask both of you guys about that both these teams in the East have been so good at in these playoffs is just clutch moments. Tyrese is 10 of 11 with shots to take the lead in the last 2 minutes in the playoffs and overall, and just in general, like they've had the Pacers have had now 3 different games where they sort of like snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Knicks obviously did it in the Detroit series as well, and the 2 comebacks at the beginning of the Boston series. When you're looking at like what makes a clutch playoff group, how much of this, even going back to the Jalen conversation, is just knowing how to win? I mean, when Mikal got there, it's like Mikal knows how to win. Mikal's won his whole life, and so some of this with these teams are like, it isn't just talent. There's an intangibles that it feels like both of these groups have, which probably defied, the logic of what you would have expected going into these series.
Yeah, for me, I mean, Trey lives it, but I just watch it. But I think the difference in a clutch player and just another great player is the clutch player isn't afraid of the consequences of missing. And it's one thing to take the shot, but there's always for most normal people, there's the thought in the back of your mind of what if I miss? And there's not that thought with a guy like Brunson or Haliburton. They're like, I may miss, but I'm not afraid to miss. Like, I want this. And not being concerned with consequences is I think really important in that regard. And then the other part of it is, I think most of the better NBA teams and NBA players that I see are the ones that they put everything they have into that game. And they're unbelievable competitors. But once the game's over, you can't do anything about it. So they kind of try to win the days in between the next game, so that they're prepared for the next game. And I think the ability to move on, win or lose, is a separating factor among the best players in the league. I don't know what you think, Trey, but that always sticks out to me.
Yeah, the biggest thing is I think it would be like a rational confidence and a little bit of delusion. And you see it in Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Haliburton. Jalen Brunson is 6'2" on a really good day. Not the most athletic, but clutch, like the winner of the clutch player of the year in the NBA. Tyrese Haliburton obviously is a little bit taller, bigger guard, but he's also skinny and not that and thin, just to be honest. And he has no fear whatsoever. Both of those guys have no fear whatsoever. And you look at them and you're just like, are they really supposed to be this good? But what separates them is their irrational confidence and a little bit of delusion. And if you want to be one of those guys, you have to be a little bit like that.
Jay, I'm curious. You mentioned the Ant draft, and Tyrese. We started doing stuff with Tyrese in the show when he got drafted by the Kings, and we used to talk about this a lot. His rookie year, he was in that same class where they didn't do the workouts because of COVID, and so the teams. I think people, everyone watched him in college and knew there was something there, but it does feel a little bit like that's a loaded draft in retrospect. Even at the time, I think people knew it was going to be good, but it's aged very well. Do you think that if he had had a normal process, things might have been a little different?
Maybe. I mean, I had him rated fourth. He was highly regarded by a lot of people. But it's one of those things, like the longer you have to think about it, like to Trey's point earlier, you start, doubt starts creeping in. Is he athletic enough to be a superstar and some of this stuff? But then when you go back and he doesn't have a classic shooting form where you're like, it goes in, like it goes in. So what are we worried about? I was a big believer in him when he came out of Iowa State. But like I've been a believer in other guys and it hadn't worked out. Yeah. So, I'm sitting here talking about my home runs instead of my strikeouts. But yeah, maybe it could have been. Maybe if they had a normal year, he would have been a higher pick. But I don't, after a while, it's really funny. Like you watch these games now, and I'm never thinking about where a guy got drafted. You're just kind of going, "Holy cow, is this guy good?"
Yeah.
And you're worried about what they're doing now. The only time I think about it is with a guy like Brunson or Draymond Green or something, and you're going, whoa, is that different than I expected? That you had a view of a player. Like I didn't think Draymond Green was going to be a Hall of Fame player, and he is. When he went in the second round, I think he was a 35th overall selection in the draft in 2011, whatever it was. And when he came out, I wasn't pounding the desk going, how could this happen? I knew he'd be good and would play in the NBA for a long time, but I didn't see this. So it works both. It kind of cuts both ways in that stuff.
Before we wrap, Jay, we just wanted to chat about this upcoming year's draft. Obviously, lottery was last week. Trey and I just did an ep with Najee Marshall on Friday, where he's very excited about his potential new teammate. Your thoughts on Cooper first, but then also we just wanted to kind of get your sense on who else you're excited to see as sort of the next month unfolds.
One, I think it's a really good draft. It's deep with really good prospects. Last year's was not this deep. There were obviously some really good players in it, but not like this year. And Cooper Flagg's the real deal. Like he's the best freshman player Duke's ever had, at least since Coach K got there, since I got there in the early 80s. He's a complete player. He's impacts the game at both ends almost equally. And he can shoot it he needs to improve his shooting, but even saying, okay, well, he's not a great shooter, but he can make shots. He shot 38% from three and was shot a very good percentage overall from the field. He's big and strong and long armed and he blocks shots. He gets steals and he's got this competitive streak that is unlike most players you see, especially at that age. I mean, he's barely 18 years old. I think he turned 18 in December. And I don't like to say he's the real deal very often, but he is the real deal. And absent injury, he'll be the real deal in the NBA, and I think he'll be very good out of the gate. But he's only going to get better. So he's the prize in this one, and I don't know anybody that thinks otherwise. And if I'm Dallas, I'm not trading that. I understand that Giannis may want out of Milwaukee and all that, but I'm not trading a future star like Cooper Flagg for anything.
Trey, who else are you looking to see in this class?
My pick would probably be Trey Johnson, kid out of Texas. I saw him first probably 2 years ago at the Nike Skills Academy. This is when I first saw Cooper as well. I was a participant as like one of the NBA, like, I'm going to just say chaperone, because I didn't really participate too much. I played a little bit and I got in the drills with some guys, but I remember seeing him play and I was like, I didn't know who he was. And I had to ask one of the guys, I was like, who is this? Like, cause he moves a little differently. He hits shots at a really high level. Now he is a tough shot maker and tough shot taker, which I know a lot of draft people aren't the biggest fans of, but in the NBA, as you can tell, if he gets to the right situation, being able to hit tough shots is so important. And that's all you see in the playoffs is tough shot making. And he does that at a really high level. And he scored, like, it sucks because he didn't make it to the tournament with Texas. And I feel like he would have gotten a lot more praise for what, he does on the basketball court. But I really feel like he's going to be a really good pro. And obviously I've said stuff about Walter Clayton on Twitter and very high on him. So those are my two guys I feel like are going to be really, really good pros.
Jay, do you have one other guy that, lottery guy, first round guy that you just feel very confident as of today, no matter where they end up, you just sort of like their chances?
I mean, it's easy to say like Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey and those guys. I think VJ Edgecombe of Baylor is going to be he's like a Oladipo, D Wade type prospect. And especially if you looked at those guys as freshmen, I think he compares really favorable to them. That's kind of the hard part is you say Oladipo and Wade, and they're thinking of them as juniors when they came out. And this guy's just a 18-year-old freshman. One guy that's not talked about as much is the kid from BYU, Yegor Demon, who can really handle it. He's got size. I think he can he's a good shooter, but he could become a better shooter. But the way he passes it, I think he's got an NBA profile, and he'll go in the lottery. I'm convinced, but I think he's a top 10 talent in this draft.
What about Khan?
Yeah, so I really appreciate what Trey said about Trey Johnson, because I agree that Johnson can really shoot it, and I think he's the best shooter in the draft along with Con Knippel. Those two guys shoot it really well. And Knippel, one thing about him, kind of like we were talking about earlier, like he's not the best athlete. So you can say, well, he's going to be a target defensively. There are a bunch of those guys that are in the league that you can target. But man, that dude can make shots. He's strong enough to take it to the basket. He's really good with shot fakes and keeping defenders off balance. And he's always around the ball. Like that guy gets a lot of loose balls. And so, sometimes I look at a guy like Christian Braun in the league and go, okay, well, Brown's more athletic than Knippel, but Knippel's bigger and a better shooter. And I think he's around the ball every bit as much. The one thing Braun does a little bit better, he's better, better athlete, better defensively, and he's a little bit better in transition. But I really like Knippel, and I would be very surprised if he's not taken in the top 7.
Trey, you want to close it out?
So this isn't really a question, it's just a comment. And what has been, I've talked about this earlier on the show, like early on, like when I was probably my second year, but obviously I come from a UNC household, and my mother, she graduated from UNC. So she almost hates everything that is Duke-wise, but I will say she did appreciate you, Jay Bilas, because you were always very honest and very truthful about your opinions, and you never held any punches, even towards Duke. And so I think that more commentators and analysts need to take more of an approach that you take on just, being straightforward, not trying to hold any bias, not trying to be hot take central, just being honest and, don't pull any punches. So that's another thank you from the Murphy household as well.
Well, tell your mom I said thanks. I'm really popular with moms.
You guys They got to hang out, Trey. I feel like this is a thing.
It's not like your wife or your girlfriend's going to say that. It's always the mom. But tell your mom I appreciate it. That's really nice of you to say. Thank you. Very kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Tommy knows I don't say a lot of nice things about people, so this is really coming from the heart.
No, this is probably the first time we've done this in this calendar year. Jay Bilas, thank you as always. Trey, I will see you this week.